Hi guys, so today's lesson is going to be for Tuesday, May 12th. You do have a bell ringer today. This is actually going to be our last week for bell ringers, so you'll be able to turn them in Friday or start turning them in on Friday, and I'll let you know how many you should have for the month as well. So we are doing two slides today, 32 and 33, and both of them are writing slides. But first, also guys, we're almost done. We are not going to go through every single slide. I know there's a lot there, but we won't get through it all. So we are almost done with notes. Actually, we will finish this week. So, I mean, it's sad, but I mean, end of the school year. So let's recap some of the stuff that we've talked about last. We talked about the polio vaccine, which is huge, huge. Being able to have a vaccine for polio changed the way that society functioned, basically. You know, people were very scared and worried and concerned that someone or they or someone in their family would get polio. I mean, for goodness sakes, FDR had contracted polio. So we looked at pictures of the iron lung, which is so hard for me to look at. There are some things in history where like I still am not used to it, you know, like the Holocaust and World War II images and things and battles and all that. But like for some reason, talking about polio and looking at pictures of the iron lung really just is difficult for me. So Jonas Salk created the vaccine for polio, which is great and amazing. We have families moving to the suburbs and using their money from the GI Bill and, you know, going back to school, purchasing a home, starting a family, and we have the baby boom. Nuclear family is born, even though it's not a real depiction of what American families look like. There it is. Yesterday we talked about slide 31. I didn't make a video. It's only one slide, and it's about highways and rebellion. So we have the creation of the interstate highway system, which obviously is still around today. 30 is a highway. You know, this is how we travel places. It's very important. Eisenhower actually got the idea from Germany, which they have the Autobahn, and there's actually no speed limits on the Autobahn, and they just drive. So however fast you want to go, you can go. But when Eisenhower implemented here in the United States, he said, we're going to have speed limits. So, which thank goodness, because that's really dangerous. So that obviously that's really important for us, and it's part of our infrastructure, so we have to keep it up and fund our roads and construction so we have proper roads. So that's just another part of the budget. But it helps us travel, which is great. Rebellion. So our teenagers and young adults are going to rebel during this time a lot because we are getting involved in things that we shouldn't. Obviously, we have this Cold War arms race with the Soviet Union, but we're going to start to get involved in what's called proxy wars in Korea and Vietnam. And the whole reason we get involved in those countries is because we don't want them to fall to communism. So we just like send troops over there. Getting involved in things that we shouldn't is a really big problem for the United States and for other countries as well. But it matters for us because we're living here. And a lot of students and, college students or just teenagers are going to rebel and say, you know what, I'm really tired of us getting involved in these things where we shouldn't. And I don't want to act like the people on TV do, you know, Leave It to Beaver. Well, I don't want to act like that family. I don't want to be like that. I want to be my own person. It's kind of like, you know, flappers in the 1920s where women are like, you know what, I'm fed up with trying to act like how society wants me to act. And every generation really has their own form of rebellion. In this case, it's going to take place in like music and television and things. So teenagers are going to rebel against the social norms, which, I mean, happens all the time in every generation, really. You just have to make it your own. I also talk about the women reverting back to life before World War II. You know, they made so much progress during World War II and in society and working and showing people that women actually have a purpose in life. And they're not just meant to stay home. And then during the 1950s, we kind of just like forgot all of that and put them right back into the household. So today we're talking about slides 32 and 33. We have, I know it says part 3, but again, we aren't doing that many more slides after this. Actually, we're going to end fairly soon at slide 37. So this is titled Kennedy and the Cold War. So President John F. Kennedy is elected in 1960, and he adopted the term the new frontier for his campaign. He said, there are new frontiers for America to conquer, not frontiers on the map, but frontiers of the mind, the will, and the spirit of man. He was a great speech giver. Great. Some voters were hesitant about voting for a 40-year-old senator for president because he was a Roman Catholic. The fear was that he might put his values of the Catholic Church over those of the American public. Imagine that being our biggest concern. It's just crazy. We've had many Catholic presidents since JFK. He ended up becoming the youngest person and the first Catholic president elected. Teddy Roosevelt was our youngest president, but he wasn't elected. He became president because McKinley was assassinated. So Teddy Kennedy was the youngest, but JFK was the youngest elected. Civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. was arrested in Georgia during a protest, and his arrest and the events that took place after are really going to help convince the public, and mainly African Americans in the South, that you should vote for Kennedy, because people were so hesitant on voting for him. The actions that are going to take place is really going to persuade the people, American people, that he's like, oh, well, he might be a really good president. So when when Martin Luther King Jr. was arrested in Georgia during a protest, JFK called MLK's lots of letters wife, Coretta, who she's still alive and she's pretty adamant in civil rights, obviously. So he calls her up and says, I'm going to get this fixed. So JFK was a huge supporter of civil rights. I wish he would have done more before he was assassinated, but he did a lot. I just wish he would have done more. So Robert Kennedy was JFK's brother, and he was a lawyer. So he calls up his brother Bobby, and he persuaded the judge to let King go on bail. So MLK is let go. He's free. He gets out of prison, and he says, okay, this man is running for president, and he helped me get out of prison. That means he supports civil rights. We had a conversation, whatever. And a lot of people were like, wow, if you support civil rights, you should vote for this person. And so that really won JFK over for a lot of people, especially in the South. To advance his domestic programs for Americans at home during the Cold War, Kennedy gathered a group of advisors that some people called the best and the brightest. His brother Bobby was made the Attorney General for the United States. This is the top lawyer for the United States. They deal with all legal matters. And then JFK turned to his advisors often, especially later on. We have instances like the Cuban Missile Crisis, which if you have me next year for World Studies, we'll talk about that. There's going to be a lot of issues with the Soviet Union, of course, and our Cold War and arms race with them. So he's going to need his advisors to help him a lot. We have Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, and the National Security Advisor. All those people are going to help us stay safe against the Soviet threat. Next slide. Don't forget a summary. No vocab, actually. Next slide, we have Kennedy's foreign policy. There's 3 vocab words on this slide. Kennedy said, what kind of peace do we seek? Not a peace enforced on the world by American weapons of war. Not merely peace for Americans, but peace for all men and women. What a guy. What a guy. He was great at speeches. So Kennedy ends up creating the Peace Corps. You may have heard about the Peace Corps. Actually, I think someone I went to high school with went to the Peace Corps. I'm not sure. The Peace Corps is exactly what it sounds like. This was his most successful policy, and it was created to help poorer nations. This entity trained and sent volunteers to Africa, Asia, and Latin America, or South America, to serve for 2 years as educators, health career workers, agriculture advisors, or in other jobs that aided in the country and the host country's development. Basically, you went there not to push ideas from the United States. You weren't there like, hello, I am here to represent the United States of America, and you should run your country like this. You should do your country like this, blah, 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 blah. That was not your job. Your job was literally to go there and say, hello, I'm here from the United States of America. What do you need me to do to help your country become better? And that's what you did. Literally, that's what you did. It's like you are there to just do good work. How you have to get community service hours and everything? Well, the Peace Corps is that times so much because you're there to just do good work. Women and African Americans felt encouraged to volunteer because they gave people a purpose. Most volunteers were young college graduates. They were instructed not to argue the merits of U.S. foreign policy and to respect the culture of their host country. Like I said, you're not there to push beliefs of the United States. You're there to support the country. So before, these were like third world countries. Well, that's not really a term that we use so much anymore. Now it's either developed countries, and the United States is a developed country, or developing countries. And these countries just need some extra support. And that's kind of what we did with the Peace Corps. Alliances for Progress is the next word. This was a foreign policy program that offered billions of dollars to aid to build schools, hospitals, roads, low-cost housing, and power plants in South America. Unlike the Peace Corps, this one did have a political agenda. It's also really similar to the Marshall Plan, which is like the medicine, right? So we're just giving money to countries so they don't fall to communism. The Alliance for Progress had a political agenda just like the Marshall Plan. And it was like, hey, we'll help you build all these things, schools, hospitals, whatever, houses for people, but you cannot fall to communism, right? So this was our goal, is to stop communist support. Oh my gosh, I'm just going to rephrase the whole thing. I'm so sorry. It's going to kind of deter or stop communist beliefs from developing in South America with our money and support. It's like, hey, we just helped you with all this stuff, so you better not fall to communism. Flexible response with strengthening conventional American forces so the nation would have other options than nuclear weapons in times of a crisis. This is amazing because we're in the middle of an arms race and a Cold War with the Soviet Union, and we have this flexible response, which think of it as like, hey, let's come up with some other ideas other than nuclear weapons. If we are ever in a conflict with the Soviet Union and things get really tense, is there anything else that we could use other than a nuclear bomb? Right? So let's be flexible on this, because nuclear weapons is like the extreme. Like, can we start out somewhere else before we just go like 0 to 100 like so quickly? So this is a kind of a way to deter or prevent an attack with the Soviet Union. And it also shows them like, hey, if we're thinking of something different than using nuclear weapons, and maybe you can start thinking of something different as well. So that's that. Like I said, we are actually going to finish the slides on Thursday, so don't go too far ahead because we aren't finishing the entire unit. We'll finish the slides on Tuesday. Oh my gosh, we'll finish the slides on Thursday, on Thursday. All right. Don't forget to answer the bell ringer question and make summaries for those slides. See you guys.